Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14. We are previewing every single football game involving the SEC for week 6, and we're actually doing that all season. Our channel is presented by Steaks. Right now, we are talking about Florida and Missouri. That one is going to kick off noon Eastern in the Swamp. Missouri had a near miss against Georgia that nobody saw coming. Florida bludgeoned Eastern Washington this weekend. I think it was a 54-17 final, something like that. Eastern Washington scored, I think, a couple of garbage touchdowns late. Florida, of course, had a built-in distraction with the awful hurricane situation, so that game got moved to Sunday. Gators will be playing on 1 day less rest than it would have been otherwise. Blake, to be honest, I don't have a good read on this game. Both teams have done some sneaky, under-the-radar good things. This one is kind of interesting to break down, in my opinion.
You've heard us say that a bit, I think, already on our previews this week. But like last week, broke us in terms of expectations, right? Because you think about kind of some of the things that happened last week, especially Missouri, Georgia. Again, it's so rare for the number 14 team in our power rankings to nearly beat the number 1 team in our power rankings, which I don't know how long it's been, if ever that's happened in the SEC. Just an improbable situation there. And some of the other stuff that happened was just, felt like kind of wacky, different things that happened in the league. But it's kind of what you expect in the SEC. And like you said, I think as always, there's a couple ways this can go, right? Either Missouri just comes out flat as can be, coming off of what would have been a potential program-changing win if you beat Georgia, and you talk about all the positive momentum you gain out of that. But to lose the game the way they did, getting back up for the next game. How many times have we seen that before, Chris? Where you have a team close call and you're like, all right, maybe this is where everything turns around, but then they come out the next game and they just cannot match that energy, and sort of, everything's kind of out of you at that point. That's what I wonder about most with Missouri heading into this one, because Florida is going to present some challenges just like Georgia did, and I think can they keep that same sort of play that they had against Georgia? I just think that's going to be a hard thing to do going on the road here against Florida.
Over under on this is around 10.5. Around 56.5. Florida about a 10.5 point favorite at home. Let's talk about when Missouri's got the ball. Tigers averaging 26.8 a game. Florida giving up 27. Missouri adjusted for sacks, averaging about 6.2 per pass. Florida giving up about 6.8. Adjusted for sacks, Missouri averaging 5.1 a rush. Florida giving up 5. Man, I'm not a huge fan of Missouri's offense. Brady Cook is kind of a game manager. They've got a multifaceted running game, but not really a breakout guy there. We've talked about Luther Burden, his disappearance from the offense at times. I don't know what to make of this. Florida is not as dominant defensively as maybe some Florida teams have been, given the athletes Florida has. Not a team that really gets after the passer exceptionally well, 1.6 sacks a game for the Gators. I don't see a lot that's just jumping out to me on this side of the ball, Blake.
We talked about in that, I think, Georgia-Auburn preview, we're like, Missouri actually was able to run the ball a couple times against Georgia for some big plays. And, overall, grand scheme of things, when you look at kind of just the numbers, a couple of those came on big plays. But, that does show you that there's the ability there for them to make some of those big plays. Who was it? Schrader had the 62, 65-yarder or something, broke off a big play. And I think, Pete had another one that was probably close to 30 yards. So, that big playability is there, especially if you can do that against the Georgia defense, which we know Georgia struggled past couple weeks. But still, that shows you there's something there to work with. And like you mentioned, how many times we mentioned the name Luther Burden? And it's just it's just a matter of, he has to be someone that you come out and understand that, you just got to get him involved. But really, Chris, we say that he's only had one game this year with more than 17 receiving yards, and that came against
And I think
Abilene
was that
Christian.
the opener?
That was against Abilene Christian. So the opener he had 17. had 3 against Kansas State, had 16 against Georgia. Um, so again, I know it's a lot of people maybe like, all right, well, come on, like move beyond the Luther Burden thing, but it's a thing. But I guess also that quarterback play matters, right? And it's also a situation where, like you said, I don't know what their confidence level is in terms of their quarterback play, and I think this is going to be one of those that maybe on the road here. Because you kind of look at kind of the sample size, right? At Kansas State, at Auburn. If you look at Brady Cook's numbers to this point, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions combined, those 2 road games. So now you go on the road again. That's something to me that kind of stands out from a stat standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, Mookie Cooper, Dominic Lovett are the guys that have been getting the ball lately. Schrader's a D2 transfer that busted a big run. He's more of a between the tackles guy. Pete is kind of more of a big play threat guy when I've watched them. But I think it's very interesting on the other side of the ball. We're going to get to that in just a minute. But first, a word from our sponsor, Stakes. Every week we make predictions in the Stakes app. That is STAKES. We want to see if you guys agree or disagree with our takes. You can go to playwithstakes.com/14. Sign up for Stakes. Place your predictions on our questions. If you use the invite code Southeastern 14, when you sign up, you'll get a double welcome bonus. Free to join, free to play. You can win NFTs. What's not to like? Join us in Stakes and see what the fun you have been missing is all about. Okay, when the Gators have the ball, Florida averaging 32.2 a game, Missouri giving up 24.8. Get this, Blake. You remember how bad Missouri's defense was a year ago?
You say they've been
Tigers
right
this year
there.
giving up
Yeah,
5 a play.
they've
This
they've
is
been.
sort of buried storyline in the league. Florida 7.4 per play. If you adjust per sack or 4 sacks, Florida averaging 8.5 yards a pass play, Missouri giving up only 5.8. Florida adjusted for sacks, 6.4 rush, Missouri 4.2. I think Richardson's the key. I mean, we have said that all year. I think he's the biggest wild card in the league. Looked great against Tennessee a couple weeks ago. I don't know what you take out of the Eastern Washington game. In that one, he's 8 of 10 for 240. 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Frankly, sounds like a stat line he had a lot a year ago. They did get to play their backup, Kitna, which that's been a question. Kitna wasn't their backup to enter the season. He played well a week ago. Florida threw for almost 18 yards of throw against Eastern Washington. Just ran the ball with a committee backfield for nearly 10 a carry. I'm thinking ahead. I think I like the under in this game, given that I'm not bullish on Missouri's offense. Florida's got a decent defense, and Missouri's defense, I'm not sure people have caught up to how effective it has been yet.
The covers, Chris, in the series here, the under is 5-0 in the last 5 meetings between these 2 teams. So something else to consider there. Under 4-0 in the last 4 Missouri games, and under is 5-0 in Missouri's last 5 road games. By the way, Chris, Gators, Florida, under is 5-1 in their last 6 games in October. So there's a lot of trends that just support your thought there. But to me, it's Missouri on the defensive side. Anthony Richardson has thrown an interception in each of his last 4 games. He's thrown a couple we saw against Kentucky, a couple against South Florida, 1 against Tennessee, 1 against Eastern Washington. I think that's huge in this because if you could force 1 or 2 of those interceptions and just set your offense up, which, like we said, the Missouri offense has not been anything stellar to this point. If you can just set your offense up for some of those shorter fields in this game, I think that goes a long way to giving Missouri a chance in this one. But defending Anthony Richardson still a problem, as we know, because even though you may have some of these mistakes, he's still someone that can change a game, with 1 play. I think he still has that kind of ability to do this. And I'm very interested to see kind of because think about this, Chris. Missouri's defense, they had Georgia flustered last week offensively. If you really
Yeah.
think about outside of just making the rally, which I don't want to take anything away from Georgia's offense on that because they had to make the plays to make that rally because it did look like at one point, what was it? I think the numbers were like Missouri had like an 80-something% chance of winning that game because they were doing a lot of things defensively to really frustrate Georgia's offense. So I think that's something else too. And that to me comes back to what is the mindset of this Missouri team coming off of that loss? And what is the mindset of the defense specifically, knowing that they played a very, very good game to give themselves a chance, but then Georgia just makes those plays that you expect Georgia to make. So defending Anthony Richardson here, that's the next challenge for the Missouri defense.
I think Florida's going to win this game. We're not professional bettors, don't pretend to be. I do think the under seems like the play in terms of Florida covering 10.5. I don't have a great feel. I mean, I would lean Florida, but let's rewind Missouri, shall we? Okay. Opening game against Louisiana Tech, I thought Missouri looked pretty good. Now that was a bad Louisiana Tech team. Missouri gets its doors blown at Kansas State, which the next week loses to Tulane. Missouri then plays a very underwhelming game against Abilene Christian, goes to Auburn, should have won. We have talked about that game a lot. If Missouri just does not reach for the pylon, probably wins that game. Or if it can hit a chip shot field goal that Harrison Mevis hits every time. So we're down on Missouri going into Georgia. Missouri darn near pulls the upset. So as for Florida, I feel like the Gators have slowly gotten better. Good showing in Knoxville. That was sort of a coming-of-age game for Anthony Richardson, although I have some questions about Tennessee's pass defense. I thought Florida responded very well against Eastern Washington, which is a respectable FCS team. Again, Florida was up, I think, 50 in that game before some garbage time scores. The more I think about this and how inconsistent Missouri has been and where Florida seems to be trending, although, goodness gracious, could have lost to South Florida 2 games ago.
Yeah.
The Gators. I mean, if I had to make a pick, it would be Florida, but I don't have a great feeling on this one.
Yeah, I think for me, it's all about, does Missouri just come out flat as can be here? And, does Florida, because that's the issue, right? If Missouri comes out flat, Anthony Richardson and that offense are clicking early on. Can Missouri play catch up? I think that's the thing to me, because like they didn't have to play catch up against Georgia, right? It wasn't a game where Georgia came out and dominated early, and Missouri has to throw the ball to get back in the game. They were able to use their defense, run the ball a little bit, and put themselves in a position to kind of maintain that lead. On the flip side, this is where, what do you lean towards? Like, is it 50-50? Is it 65-35 in terms of, does Missouri have that where they just come out, that emotion that was all there? You're a couple plays away, having a chance to maybe beat the number one team in the country. And we've seen it. It's just, do you come out flat? That's the biggest question I have with Missouri here. But if you look at the numbers, I think, like you said, the under, the trends I mentioned, they seem to set up pretty nicely for the under, unless you think it's going to kind of correct itself and it has to stop at some point. But everything else, Missouri has been right there these past 2 games against Auburn and Georgia. You talked about it, a couple plays here or there. We're having a much different discussion. So it's just, it's hard to pick which one you lean towards on that, because has Florida just been that dominant team yet? Again, in these kind of games, they haven't. And so I don't know. It's a tricky one, but I think, like you said, I think the points are probably the better play in this one.
You know what we wanted? We wanted fun. We wanted interesting stuff. And I feel like that's for the most part what we're getting. And this is a game that a few weeks ago, based on the way each team was playing, looked like a dog of a game. Now it looks pretty interesting. So
it's a lot more intriguing. Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, because this is one I think you're gonna watch just because you're like, I don't know what's gonna happen here, like, because Missouri and what they've done the past couple weeks. So yeah.
Well, you say you're going to watch. The problem is that's at the same time as Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Tennessee LSU.
Well, it's look, you got 4
But
or
if you're
5
like me and you have 3
iPad,
screens
you got a
going at the same
phone, you got a
time, then you will
TV,
be
you got a
watching.
computer. Come on, Chris, you got plenty of options.
Right. I can't make excuses. Okay, thank you for watching. We are again previewing every single SEC game for this week. So best way to catch those, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.